China has endorsed a sweeping overhaul of Hong Kong's electoral system, seen by many as another nail in the coffin for the pro-democracy movement. The reforms include increasing the number of Beijing-approved officials in Hong Kong's legislature. China's aim, ensuring only, quote, patriotic figures can run for positions of power.
China's leaders voting in favour of giving regular Hong Kong residents less of a say. Members of Beijing's National People's Congress Standing Committee, or the NPCSC, voted unanimously in favour of the new rules, 167 to 0. They see the changes as necessary to filter out undesirable elements and to make sure the right people can stand for positions of power. This improvement of the electoral system will prevent the anti-China rabble-rousers from being present in the election committee or the legislative council in order to engage in sabotage, subversion or instigation. That is how we can ensure implementation of the Patriots Administering Hong Kong principle. The new measures also reduce the number of seats up for selection by ordinary Hong Kongers for their legislative council. Previously, voters picked 35 seats, half of the 70 seats in the legislature. That number is now reduced to 20. While Hong Kong's pro-Beijing government welcomed the move, saying it was a step in the right direction, pro-democracy lawmakers lamented the changes, saying they represent a regressive legislative rollback. The pro-democracy camp fears the voice of Hong Kong's people would be completely lost in the debate chambers.
In the past, we know that the major problems that we are facing is not just about housing or not just about whether or not the young people can get the social mobility. It is about whether the system can actually reflect what Hong Kong people think.
On the streets of the Special Administrative Region, many Hong Kongers expressed concern. I always think about how it was promised that Hong Kong wouldn't change for 50 years, but it hasn't even been 25, and I think it's already changed a lot. That's why I'm worried about my future, as well as those people around me. Hong Kong is already changed. What election? Are you kidding? This isn't an election. It's merely a game that benefits certain people. It's meaningless. With the system overhaul, that scepticism could soon be shared by many voters, making the first legislative elections under the new system in December all the more interesting.
And for more on this, let's bring in DW correspondent Phoebe Kong, who joins us now from Hong Kong. So Phoebe, tell us more about these reforms.
This reform has effectively reset almost all electoral rules in Hong Kong. This is the most aggressive political overhaul we've seen since Hong Kong's handover. That on one hand, Beijing tries to dilute the opposition representation by drastically reducing the directly elected seats in the legislature and the election committee, which is responsible for picking the chief executive. Then replacing those vacancies with people from government-appointed organizations and Beijing-controlled sectors. So as a result, for example, the seats in the legislature used to account for the directly elected seats used to account for half of the legislature in the past, but under the new rules in the future, only less than a quarter. And on the other hand, no matter who wins this election, whoever wants to run for it must first go through a loyalty test judged by the authorities. So the new vetting mechanism will be controlled by the government alone, and senior officials will be the vetting members who approves the candidacy, and they will take advice from chief executive and Beijing officials. And this is also the very first time in Hong Kong's history that the National Security Police will actually have a say to decide which candidates to be disqualified or not.
Now, we've seen Beijing, try to rein in the pro-democracy movement in several ways in recent times. Is this really the nail in the coffin for democracy in Hong Kong?
Well, the authorities, they argued that the new institution will represent a more diverse interest of the society because its size and composition are both increased. But in fact, when we look at the numbers of the directly elected seats, they are actually, which are directly elected by the general public, by the general voters in Hong Kong. These seats are drastically diminished, and not to mention the multiple hurdles added under the new proposal. that it's getting even more difficult for people to run for election because they have to prove their loyalty and allegiance to Beijing at first hand. And Beijing is really trying every means to ensure there is zero risk in any election. And we can expect that the election results will be more controllable than before that in the future elections. But the people's will and the public opinion will be suppressed and even more underrepresented in the future elections.
Well, speaking of public opinion, I mean, what has been the reaction to this sweeping overhaul?
Well, the general public, I can see a mood that people are very concerned because, this is a huge controversy, as I have mentioned, that this is the most aggressive overhaul, a huge political blow since the national security law. This is another major change, fundamental change in Hong Kong's politics. But this reform has been realized just within a month, within extensive consultation at local level. And the critics and also, of course, the opposition can see this as an end of their political career within the political institution because they think Beijing is determined to stop all of them from entering the political institution through elections. And elections used to be one of the few remaining peaceful and legitimate ways for them to continue advocacy. But now many of them protests have been largely banned. And now election seems another dead end for them to continue their movement. And it will be even harder for the opposition camp to continue the advocacy peacefully and safely in the future.
DW correspondent Phoebe Kong in Hong Kong, thank you very much for that update.